So in this video I'd like to talk about how to divide fractions. And when you have one fraction divided by another, there are three things that we've got to do. So these are the three steps. The first step says to change the divide sign to a times sign. So we change the division sign to a multiplication sign. The second step says we've got to flip the second fraction. So we've got to invert the second fraction. And the third one says we've then got to multiply and simplify. So let's see what this means. Well, in this example, we've got a over b divided by c over d. So in this case, a, b, c, and d are just numbers. So the first thing that we do is we're going to take this divide sign, so this divide sign, and we change that to a times sign, as I've said to do up here. So this divide sign becomes a times sign. And the second thing we're going to do is flip the second fraction. So basically we just take this fraction and turn it on its head. So we take c over d and flip it over. And when we flip this fraction over, we get d over c, because the bottom one goes to the top and the top one goes to the bottom. So let's just highlight this. So we take this fraction, c over d, the second fraction, and flip it over. So c over d becomes d over c. And the last step, step number 3, says that we then just got to multiply and simplify. So we've got a over b times d over c. As usual, when multiplying fractions, we multiply the top together and multiply the bottom together. So the top becomes ad, because that's the a times d, the numerators are multiplied together, divided by b times c. That's the product of the denominators. So essentially, for any of the following examples, we just follow these 3 steps. So let's now apply our 3 steps to some examples. So let's try looking at a half divided by a quarter, or 1 over 2 divided by 1 over 4. So the first step says we're going to take this divide sign and change it to a times sign. So this is the same as a half. Now we've got times. And the second step says that you now got to flip the second fraction. So if we take 1 over 4, what happens when we take the reciprocal, or we flip the fraction over? Well, when we do that, the reciprocal of 1 over 4 is just 4 over 1, so that's 4 over 1. That's what we get when we swap the 4 and 1, when we flip it over. So now we just complete the multiplication. We know how to multiply fractions, so we've got 1 times 4, that's the product of the numbers on the top, so that's 1 times 4. Then we divide that by the product of the numbers on the bottom, the denominators, so that's 2 and 1. 1 times 4 is just 4, divided by 2 times 1, which is just 2. And 4 divided by 2 is just 2. Okay, so that's our first example. Let's look at another example. So we've got 5 over 3 divided by 2 over 5. So again, our first step says to take this divide sign and change it to a multiplication sign, a times sign. So you've got 5 over 3 divided by 2 over 5. That becomes 5 over 3. Remember, we keep the first fraction the same. Now we've got times. So now for our second step says we've got to flip the second fraction over. So when you flip 2 over 5 over, or take the reciprocal of 2 over 5 is just 5 over 2. Because we swap the numbers around. And now we just, again, complete the multiplication. Well, the product of the top numbers, 5 times 5, is just 25. And the product of the bottom numbers is 3 times 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. And now we're done, because 25 and 6 don't have any common factors, so this is the fraction in its fullest simplified form. So now for one more example, in this case we've got 4 over 7 divided by 3. Now 3 isn't a fraction, but we can remedy that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 4 over 7, so we've got 4 over 7. I'm not going to change the divide sign yet, I'm going to keep the divide sign. I'm going to write 3 as a fraction. To do this, remember that we can just divide by 1. So 3 is the same as 3 divided by 1. Because 3 divided by 1 is 3, so it's exactly the same number. And now we can apply our same 3-step process. So remember, the first step said that we've got to change the divide sign to a multiplication sign. So if we change the divide sign to a multiplication sign, we've got 4 over 7 times something. So times something. Then, following our second step, we've now got to flip the second fraction. And if we flip 3 over 1, that becomes 1 over 3. Because again, we just turn it over. So that's times 1 over 3. Now for our last stage, we just complete the multiplication of these two fractions. So the product of the top two numbers, 4 times 1, and we've got that divided by the product of the bottom two numbers, so 7 and 3. Well, 4 times 1 is just 4, and 7 times 3 is 21. And now we're done, because 4 and 21 are coprime. In other words, they share no common factors. So now this is completely simplified. So that's how we divide two fractions.